Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Tampa's Archives Awareness Week program. This is our second program out of a week full of programs, so we hope that you'll go out and visit everyone, check out all the local programs. We have brochures that list all of the fun events that are going on this week. We have two today. This is the first of two, and then there is going to be a great program tomorrow at the Henry B. Plant Museum, which will start at noon tomorrow, and all of the details can be found in this brochure. So it is my privilege today to introduce the first program. Our speaker is Catherine L. Cat Thompson, and she will be talking about iconography and symbolism in funerary art. And Cat is a Tampa native, multimedia artist, and she received her Master of Fine Arts from the University of South Florida with a concentration in sculpture and traditional and digital printmaking, and the equivalent of a minor in 19th century art history. Her interests are varied. She lives in a true Florida jungle with resident barred owls and other critters, exploring and researching cemeteries with a focus on 19th century mourning culture and funerary iconography, reading, hiking, photography, traveling, and getting together with her friends. She has taught art and art history at the University of South Florida, the University of Tampa, Eckerd College, and Hillsborough Community College. Please join me in welcoming Cat Thompson.
Well, thank you. And I recognize a few of the people here. Anyway, I'm going to start with telling you the truth of how I got into iconography and cemeteries. Okay, first, I'm not going to read this. It's the origin, but it will be on the recording, hopefully. Anyway, so here's the origins of my interest. When I was 5 years old, my paternal grandmother died. She died very young, and so I was hauled to the graveside thing and got bored, and my nickname's Cat because I was and still am impenetrably curious. So I ran away, and I found this very nearby, a baby lamb on a grave. So after the funeral was over, I ran over to my maternal grandmother. Nanny, Nanny, there's a baby lamb. So I drag her over, and she goes, oh, that's very sad. That means a baby died. So my eyes opened widely. And ever since then, whenever I'm in a cemetery, I would wander around. And now I do it on purpose, not just wandering. So that's my confession. Iconography is the science of identification, description, classification, and the interpretation of symbols, themes, and subject matter in the visual arts. This is an overview of Oaklawn Cemetery, Tampa's oldest cemetery dating back to the 1830s, and it was a cemetery for everyone. There were no class distinctions, no race, nothing. And it probably was initially referred to as a burying ground, but it's our oldest, which, given if you're from New England, that's not very old. So you will see some older cemetery headstones. Oh, and let me also tell you, I kind of dance between tombstone, gravestone, headstone. They're all the same thing. Tombstone comes from the west. Gravestone comes from the east, but they've been mingled, so I kind of use them interchangeably. And also what you're seeing here in Oaklawn Cemetery is at the beginning of the 19th century, actually in the late Georgian century, there was a trend away from cemeteries being private, family, or church, or temple, synagogue located, to being more of a central thing, a municipal. And along with it came what is called the rural cemetery landscaping, which is they turned cemeteries into parks. And on Sundays, families wouldn't just come to visit their dead relatives. They would promenade and sit on benches in the shade and have hors d'oeuvres. So cemeteries became a gathering place. a social place. Okay, starting with, in America specifically, the Civil War, the whole construct of funerals changed. Before that, it was very individualized. It was very personal. It was family. What you're seeing, Jay's sudden mourning, is it became an industry, an enormous industry. And Jay's was a warehouse in England that sold or rented everything you could possibly need. Clothing, jewelry, drapes. You had to drape windows and mirrors. God forbid you look at yourself and go like this, you know. And then the other one, okay, it becomes very commercialized. Sears sold tombstones. So things really changed. All right, so I started out with a baby tombstone, so I'm going to do some baby and child ones first. This is one at Rose Hill, which is close to Myrtle Hill. It's a very small cemetery. And this is a specific whole section set aside for babies and children. And I include here why so many children died. Up to 40% of children died before they reached the age of 4 or 5. And pneumonia, influenza, tuberculosis, diarrhea, and even just cuts, any kind of infection. And I mean, let's not even go into how many women died during and after childbirth because of the lack of sanitation. So anyway, but there are sections in older cemeteries specifically for babies and children because it wasn't necessarily traditional, unless you're wealthy, to have a family plot. So there was a section set aside. Okay, here is a good example from Oaklawn. And it's a broken arch. It wasn't intended to be broken, but it's an arch. We have a lamb. We also have a photograph, which that started occurring after the 1850s on headstones. And the lamb indicates death of a child in Christ. Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. The arch is a symbolic passage into the next life. If I'm talking too fast, Deborah, tell me slow down. Okay, this is an unusual design for a child's grave. Instead of an adult angel, a lamb, a dove, or a cherub, or a baby angel, it depicts an older childlike, so therefore representing a young child and not a baby. Doves. Doves are not just specifically for children or baby graves, but this one is. As a pure white bird, they represent purity, which is so strongly connected to children. They also represent peace in the soul's ascension to heaven, specifically this one with its wings up. If one wing is broken, it symbolizes a life cut short, but all child graves do represent that. Wings up, ascension to heaven. All right, this is a headstone for 2 children who both died in 1900 in Nova Scotia. One 10 months old, the other one 4 years old. I need to do my research. That's prior to the Great Spanish Flu, but obviously something impacted 2 children very closely together. So we have a dove with an olive branch and then a rose. And the rose is a bud, which is a symbol of a child. This one is a whole lot more complicated. We have flowers, which are lilies. We have drapes, which is drapes open and close like you go through to the other side. We also have a flying baby head, a flying cherub head, which is interesting. The flight of the soul from the body upwards in the hope of resurrection. And you're going to see more drapes. Okay, here's more doves. Okay, a dove with flowers, which usually represents a woman. And the flowers are a full rose and small. So a woman, then that represents her children. And then this one is an olive branch. The soul has reached divine peace in heaven. Arches. Arches are ancient. And also, let me deviate here. Observing some kind of cultural tradition to honor our dead goes back to prehistory. Even there are now signs that the Neanderthals used rituals and specific things to honor their dead. So funerary customs, and therefore funerary art, goes all the way back. So a lot of the symbolism and mourning symbols, it goes back to the Greeks and Romans, like urns. That's where they put the ashes. So urns go way back. All right, so here we have just a plain arch, victory of life or victory in death. This one is interesting. It's a carved marble brick wall, which is unusual. It has an arch. And I think it may refer to the young man being a bricklayer, or his family being in that field. And it has a scroll. Scrolls are the symbol of life and time. Here we go to crosses. In the Western world, crosses are ubiquitous. I could do a whole 2-hour lecture on crosses. Enduring symbol of Christian faith, represents salvation, resurrection, and sacrifice. This one is more traditional, but this one is actually carved as like gnarly wood. And so it possibly references the idea of the historical cross, but maybe also the song, The Old Rugged Cross. And here is a tilted cross. This is a portate cross. And it's a symbol of Jesus achieving salvation, hauling the cross. And then when he lays it down, he has laid down his burden. And it has a rose, full rose, and rosebud. So he died in the prime of life, and the rosebuds probably indicate children. More crosses. Here's the Virgin Mary bearing the burden of the cross, which is her sacrifice and her loss as well. And here is crucified Christ. And let me see, where's my Zoom? Oh, well. On the bottom, there is the seal for the Woodmen of America, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit because they're pretty interesting. Hand or hands, very common symbol. 2 hands grasping is friendship and or love and marriage. It's very common in almost all cemeteries. You can sometimes tell that it's a man and woman, but sometimes it is about friendship and companionship. A hand with a finger pointing up symbolizes the hope of heaven, and a finger pointing down, really it's the same thing, but you kind of might think, oh, it's just the opposite, you're going down. No. It represents God reaching down for the soul. And this one's interesting. Okay, who knows Mr. Spock? Who Mr. Spock is, right? Right? Live long and prosper? Well, this is what it comes from. It's the 2 hands, palm out, and I can't quite do it perfectly. Whoops. Like this. And it's the priest order, Kohanim, blessing Israel. And it also indicates that the dead man and woman came from priestly stock. The most common name associated with this is Cohen. That is more common. So Leonard Nimoy was Jewish. And this is, he grew up, very Orthodox. So he chose that hand symbol on purpose. Okay, here's urns, Greek symbol of mourning the body as a vessel of the soul, repository for the ashes. They're often draped with a cloth or festooned with a wreath or garland, or sometimes all of them. A draped urn, fully draped, usually represents the death of an older person. Here we have another scroll, and yes, another baby lamb. So the scroll is a symbol of life and time, both enrolled, indicates a life that is unfolding like a scroll of uncertain length. It can also suggest honor and commemoration. There's ivy, and ivy is for remembrance and honor. Here we have yet another draped urn, but below it is a book. And books are found on headstones, and the Book of Life, the Bible. It may also depict that the person was a scholar, a learned man, or even dealt in books. Okay, I'm actually going pretty fast. I should have brought my paper on this. Fraternal Order Masonic. This one's from Oaklawn, and this is representing a woman, Eastern Star. Oh yeah, and if your phone rings, I might have to make you dance. That's what I did to my classes. I won't. Okay. Anyway, this tombstone, was up in the old burying grounds in Halifax. And it's a Georgian era cemetery where I found the most amazing and marvelous things. And it has more Masonic symbols than anything I have ever seen. And I meant to bring my list and read it all. Like, this is a keystone. We have the sun and the moon. We have a Sacred Heart, a book with, and this is not hands. It's third level, not master, third level something. I have it all. I mean, it's like Jacob's Ladder. It has more symbols on it than I've ever seen. And so I called a Mason I knew, because a couple of these I was having trouble figuring out. Like the keystone, it has something on it. And at first I thought it was a clock. And he said, okay, it's a keystone, but I can't tell you the rest. It's secret. It's encrypted.
Where is the cemetery?
This is in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada.
It's a little far, but okay.
Right. And it's,
If you're a Mason or an Eastern Star, you would know what that meant.
yeah.
You would.
But I've seen a lot of Masonic symbols. I've never seen this many. And this is from the 1830s. So it's really old. Okay, modern woodman America. And I think you want to hear about this too. I got really curious years and years ago when I kept seeing these headstones with a log. And then I'd read, modern woodman. Very interesting organization. It had a lot of, very unique restrictions and criteria. Religiously, it was very open. And I'm going to read this. Jew and Gentile, Catholic and Protestant, agnostic and atheist. However, until the mid-1900s, restricted to white males between the ages of 1845 from only 12 states, which I don't have listed. And people, I love this list, people who were disqualified from ever being a member were from certain professions. Railway workers, underground miners, gunpowder factory employees, liquor wholesalers, manufacturers, saloon keepers, aeronauts, sailors on the lakes and seas, and professional baseball players. I just think that's a little wackadoodle. However, it was, as a fraternal order, you paid dues, and one of the things you got with your dues is on your demise, your family, the tombstone would be paid for. It was like an insurance policy, and they became and still are an insurance and financial company.
And last month when we drove past their headquarters in Omaha.
Yep, that's where they're based now.
Still, look, they're still there.
Okay. Symbols connected to military service, which I'm going to have to do a whole section now based on this. Based on your military branch, your origin, religious culture, personal connection. Arlington Cemetery now uses 65 different symbols on their stones. And it goes from your common, a cross, a military rank, to Wicca. So it's interesting to go online and look at all the symbols that are now approved to put on those stones. This one is a very interesting, oops, shoot, I did it again. I don't know if you can see, this is from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And generally, whenever you see rifles crossed, it is a reference, of course, to warfare, and that the person is a veteran. In this particular, and it's the flag of Canada upside down, which then, if you look further, he died in the war. So this is a memorial to a fallen soldier, World War I. And this is a more common one with just a simple cross in World War II. And he managed to live through the war and then died in 1952.
My brother was in Arlington, and he did not serve in the war. He was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. National Guard. Therefore, it always says it's LTC USA.
Yeah, I actually got abandoned in Arlington almost in the middle of the night. I managed to catch one more subway out, but I stood there, middle of the night, winter, wind blowing, all the tombstones.
Because my father-in-law and my brother are both buried in the same columbarium, but on opposite ends, and I can never find.
It's huge. It is huge. Anyway, now we're switching to, once again, Tampa, the Italian Club Cemetery, which is really, if you've never been there, the most amazing statuary. Oh my heavens. It is just amazing and gorgeous. So it was established in 1896 following the purchase of the land from the Armwood family, Tampa's pioneering African-American family. So here we have a family mausoleum. What's a mausoleum? It's a building, and inside of it are individual crypts for members of the family. On the right, we have a Virgin Mary, Jesus, and Joseph on top of another family mausoleum. Beautiful sculptures. This is one of the Pietà of the Virgin Mary holding the dead Jesus. And then on this side is a tiled headstone. And tile work goes way, way back. It's connected to Europe, specifically the Mediterranean area. And we now see tile work in cemeteries all over the Americas connected to Spanish, Italian, and Hispanic cultures. And some of them are simple, and some of them are extremely beautifully ornate. Obelisk, they're common, and they're very old. Where do obelisks come from? Egypt. And where does the fascination in the Western world come from? Napoleon stealing a very famous, ginormous obelisk from Egypt. So anyway, obelisk, it's a four-sided monument with a pyramidal shape on top, or in this case, two draped urns. And they can be fairly short, or they can be as high as the ceiling, or higher. Think of the mall in DC. Anyway, so can symbolize a god, reaching up to God, astronomical event in the past, or commemorate achievements of an important person or persons. All right, going into a little bit more about fauna. I could do this whole thing on just the plants and flowers. Weeping willow. The name of the tree is obvious. It represents sadness and loss, sorrow and mourning. Wreaths and garlands are on a lot of different stones for different reasons. A lot of time it was for honors, for heroes, for warriors, and wearing a wreath, or wreath on their head even. Distinction in arts, literature, athletics, military, and this is not an ivy wreath, this is a floral wreath, but it does have a festoon, which then symbolizes memory. Okay, these are two headstones from Goose Creek. We're going into a slightly different Western culture here, the Gaelic culture. Nova Scotia means New Scotland, and the Scottish immigrated to Canada, but very specific to this area. And they also have the only Gaelic college, really in the world. They don't have it in Ireland and Scotland. It's in Nova Scotia. And people come from all over the world to study the language and the history. So anyway, what we have is we have thistles, the flower of Scotland, and we have shamrocks. I don't know if you can quite make them out. So Thistles connotes bravery, courage, and loyalty in the face of treachery. And you need to think about treachery. England and Scotland. Shamrock, little clover. It is connected to the Holy Trinity. 3 leaves are the most common. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Also, faith, love, and hope. Now we're still in Canada. These are my absolute favorites. I'm a bit morbid sometimes. Flying skulls, crossbones, flying heads. Here, this has everything on it. So it has a flying head, which is the soul ascending, hopefully. We have a skull, memento mori. Remember, death will come. We have crossbones, the death within us, and an hourglass laid on its side, a life cut short. Here we have just the head and the crossbones, but we have skulls flanking it, and then another one. Here's a flying head, the soul ascending. It's not as gruesome as the skull. I do prefer the flying skulls. But you can see here the difference in the carving skills. And some of this is by how old they are, but it's also how much money the family had. Obviously, this kind of carving takes more time, and this one's far more simple.
It would also be a stone, because when I've gone and looked at my ancestors, they were old stones that were like, not granite, but you know what I mean, they were a softer stone, and they sewed every one of them.
Oh, the earliest stones, number one, when the Puritans, et cetera, came over, they didn't really use stones, they used wood. So those graves have mostly disappeared. The most common stones are brown sandstone, which is strong, schist, but slate. Slate is the most problematic one because slate is made in layers. It develops in layers. So if water gets between layers, it spalls. So it's a little more problematic. Actually, brown sandstone is one of the better. And then they went to granite. Granite is brilliant, takes better carving skills, and you have to have sources. And up in New England, there were sources. And then marble. Marble was more traditional in Europe. It was a Johnny-come-lately here. And I think, oh, good. So, I can't walk around. I'm so used to walking around my classrooms. These are these interesting things I saw at the old burying ground in Halifax. They date back to the Georgian period. And they look like tables to me. And I'm going, oh, did they bring chairs and sit around and have dinner on top of whoever? No, they're called wolf tables. They're called wolf tables. Way back in the Georgian period, prior to the 19th century, guess what? Where we live, all of America was wild, full of wild animals. So it's called a wolf table to keep a wolf or wolves or other varmints from digging up the grave. The simpler is a wolf slab, which is that slab but laid straight on the ground for the same reason, and they were outsized. They were a lot bigger than the grave. And so wolf tables especially does indicate a higher class, more money in the family. And they're engraved on the top, which is very sad because on almost every one I saw, it had weathered into absolute, you couldn't read a thing. Okay, this is my final one. It's a contemporary grave at Rose Hill Cemetery. I want y'all to read what the T-shirt says. Can you read it? All right. Warning, do not touch my tools or my daughter. And it was a guy who had a sense of humor, and his family went along and put that right after he died on his tombstone. So that's a slightly lighter, but also far more contemporary touch. Contemporary stones and monuments there is no end to what you can have carved, laser carved guided by computers. I mean, I've seen cars. I've seen the whole top of a grave shaped like a six-pack of beer. I mean, and your casket can be made into anything. So the contemporary form of headstones and gravery art, funerary art, has far expanded. I will probably not make a list for contemporary times because the sky's the limit. All right, so let me stop. Any questions?
One thing I'd like to point out, one of the best and most interesting places you can go is the Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C. I have a lot of favorite stones there, but my very favorite, the fellow has not gone, or he hadn't as of my last visit, but the Library of Congress. And so his gravestone is an accession card from an old card catalog in a library with the holes in the bottom.
Wow,
And his date of deaccession is one.
that's really wonderful.
Oh, I've got pictures somewhere. I'll drag them up.
And then there was the lady in Texas that was, what was it, Mary Kay Cosmetics?
Yeah.
Pink. And she was a high seller. She had a pink Cadillac. And she was buried in her pink Cadillac, dressed all in pink with her hair dyed pink. So, like I said, nowadays, but then again, go back to the Egyptians. What were the Egyptians buried with? Every single thing they could use in their life and afterlife. So it's like, you know, the circle is unbroken. All right, any other questions? Because I know you were interested in the Woodmen of America, too.
I wanted to tell you that the Woodsmen of the World
Woodsmen of the world,
became very popular
right.
in Tampa because we had so many immigrants. Immigrants were all alone. They did not know when they were going to die, but they did want to be remembered. And the idea of the insurance company,
The membership
tried
and then,
to be
yeah,
members of that. Many of those were in northern states that eventually migrated to Tampa.
right.
In Tampa, we had the mutual aid societies
Oh, yeah,
that provided cemeteries, but those that had those insurances out of the north are found here when you visit our different cemeteries.
oh, yeah.
Because the log is symbol of that particular institution.
Right, and I've gotten a little bit obsessional about them, their headstones, because there's so many designs.
There's so many
So many designs. Oh, my heavens. I've now documented about 10 of them, and I know there's more, including one that there's no log, there's a severe sphere on the top with their seal on it.
I've often wondered if that's according to what level of premium you were paying. The more you paid, the bigger the log.
Well, when I looked into it, it was covered by your membership dues, and then you added to it. But mostly it was they had approved symbols, approved designs that were carved by the local people. So there was room for fluidity there in design. But they had, you know, about 20 approved designs. I have not found all of them.
In our Latin cemeteries, you will find the tile that you were discussing. If you study the time period, you find that in the 20s, tile was very traditional.
Right.
So a lot of our tile tombstones are all in the 20s, early 30s.
Right. And that child grave, the graveyard I showed at the beginning, that was from the 20s, the turn of the century. But that was also a period of great loss of children. But yeah, I'm really, well, there's the modern woodmen of the world. There's the Woodmen of America. They had a split. But I'm most fascinated, though, with all the designs. But I didn't show it. I should have shown it. I have a log, you know, because one of their designs is an upright log. But an upright tree trunk cut off represents a life cut short, and this one had nothing to do with them. So that is a standard symbol of usually a man's life cut short. And there's some in Woodlawn. All right, any other questions? Oh, and I'm also wearing some mourning jewelry, and so is my friend Kim. And she's wearing the memento mori. Remember, you must die. The skull beneath the skin. All right, well, thank you very much. Y'all are amazingly quiet, though, other than my two friends.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I guess we're running out of time, probably.
Well, we want to thank you. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
a gift from us.
Oh, well,
Thank
thanks.
you very, very much.
And you're going to introduce him, but he's the next speaker. Stick around. He's got some amazing stories. I hope you tell some of them.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.